very much, Chair, for that. I wanted to ask some questions to the Office of Impact Analysis.
This is to the table.
Thank you. Hello. Are you the Office of Impact Analysis?
Yes, Joanna Abeyaratner. I'm the Executive Director of the Office of Impact Analysis.
Okay, great. And it used to be called the Office of Best Practice Regulation, right?
That's correct, sir.
And why did you change the name?
It was changed in 2023 when they updated the guide and revised it. And they revised it at the time as sort of noted on our website to reflect the current practice around looking at policies more broadly in terms of their impacts.
But do you still look at the cost of regulation?
Yes, we do, Senator. So for anything that requires an impact analysis,
right,
agencies are required to include the regulatory burden of that policy within the impact analysis.
The regulatory burden, so the total cost of new regulations, that's in your bailiwick. That's germane to your role.
Yes, that's correct, Senator.
Okay. So what was the total cost of new regulations put in place in the last Parliament?
I don't. One moment. Yeah, I might take that on notice on Senator. I will note that we do publicise on our website. So we have the Office of Impact Analysis has a website hosted on the PMNC website that publicises for every announced policy, includes the regulatory burden estimate. So that's included in our public documents, and we also release summary reports per financial year. So we do have that information available on our website. That's for Australian government policy, Senator. They'll really release that information.
Okay.
Yeah.
But do you know the total cost of regulation across the economy that affects the operation of business?
So, Senator, when we look at the regulatory impact, it's only for policies coming forward. So that's when we trigger an impact analysis. So that won't look at the total cost. Yeah.
So you don't look at the stocks of regulation on the books. You look at flows. You look at new proposals.
That's correct, Senator.
Okay. So when I ask you what was the cost of new regulations in the last Parliament, you take that on notice?
I'll take that on notice, sir.
Okay. But generally, has the regulatory burden increased significantly over the last Parliament compared to the recent decade?
I'll take that on notice, Senator.
Okay.
And just noting that the regulatory burden estimate, so the Office of Impact Analysis has on its website some guidance for agencies in developing the regulatory burden estimate. It's a regulatory burden measurement framework.
Yeah.
And that's been in place, I understand, since 2014.
Yeah.
So we only have estimates published on our website going back to 2014.
Sure. But the idea of your division is to, I imagine, is to stop undue cost on business, is it not?
So the Office of Impact Analysis, so our role in the office is to administer the Australian Government's Guide for Policy Impact Analysis, which you were referring to before. We also administer the Regulatory Impact Analysis Guide for ministers' meetings and national standard setting bodies. So we administer those guides.
Sure.
And the guide's role, the Australian Government's Guide to Policy Impact Analysis, notes that the objective is to inform decisions of the overall impacts of policies, provide robust evidence to inform government.
Okay. So do you cost proposals?
So the office doesn't actually undertake the costing, the impact analysis ourselves. So,
who does?
So it's relevant departments who undertake the impact analysis. So and these are released on our website.
Okay.
So but we'll make administrative decisions around the administering the framework.
Okay. So you bring together the total costs.
No. So what we do is for each policy, we report on our website the impact analysis developed once announced. The impact analysis developed by the department.
Yeah.
We work with the department to ensure that they include in there the regulatory burden estimate, as well as any other impacts on the economy, people, or businesses, and we publish that on our website.
Okay. So, but you're in the Prime Minister's department.
That's correct, Senator.
I think a reasonable person would assume that you're looking at the cost of new proposals that could impact the cost of doing business in Australia. And therefore, you would advise government on the best way to deploy new regulation in some form.
So the policy authority for regulatory policy does sit with the Department of Finance. The Office of Impact Analysis works across departments and across the APS to support them in bringing forward impact analysis to support government decisions.
So there's a requirement for ministers to cost new proposals, the impact of new proposals, and provide that information to your department.
So they would provide that through decision-making processes, and the breadth of what the framework covers for Australian government decisions would be new policies or proposals of government with an expectation of compliance that have a more than minor impact on Australian sort of people, community, organisations and businesses.
Right, and you comment on the quality of regulation proposed.
So for all impact analysis, we will provide an assessment of the quality using our rubric, and we publish that assessment.
Okay.
So maybe just to clarify that point, Senator, I think the assessment that is provided by the office really goes to the quality of the analysis that's undertaken within the impact analysis itself.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily an assessment of the regulatory impact or the quality of or the regulatory burden per se.
Okay. So how many bills passed through your process last Parliament?
So, Senator, last Parliament, I'll have to take that on notice in terms of that time frame. But we do, again, publish online for anything for policies that are announced, so finalised policy processes, once they're announced or introduced into legislation, then they're included in our website, published on our website.
Okay. So the government has said that it now wants to do deregulation, right? That's part of the government's policy, isn't it, Minister?
The Treasurer spoke, I think, at some length about this.
Okay. So how has that affected the body that you work in PMC?
So in terms of impact analysis?
Well, after the election, the Treasurer announced that the government now wanted to do deregulation. So basically, in the last Parliament, there were hundreds of bills passed costing billions of dollars in new compliance costs. You have the information on notice, you say, and now we hear, well, we want to change direction, we want to have less regulation. So I'm wondering, given that you're in the central agency, working in the Prime Minister's department, how has this announcement from the Treasurer post-election that the government now is against more regulation, given the Treasurer has read a book about American life and politics and policy, abundance, and now he wants to deregulate. So I'm just wondering how that's impacted the Office of Impact Analysis and your approach to analysing new policy proposals.
So I think, Senator, just to sort of pick that apart a little bit, the officer's role is very specific. So it's really designed to ensure that decision makers have all of the evidence and the information around the costs and benefits of a measure in front of them when they make a decision, and to support the APS to ensure that there's a quality of analysis there. In terms of regulatory policy and the broader questions that you're raising there, that is really a matter for the Department of Finance, and Finance will be able to answer your questions. I think they're on later tonight. So they will be able to talk to some of those questions of regulatory burden and overall kind of regulatory policy approaches.
So how many proposals have been advised that they're too expensive on industry or too cumbersome for business, for example?
In terms of the Australian Government Guide to Policy Impact Analysis, we look at the guide itself goes through what kind of evidence and analysis should be in an impact analysis, and again, as Ms Williams says, we assess against that if that evidence has been included in the impact analysis. So that's the assessment we provide. Including looking at as one component, but maybe other components, the regulatory costs and the benefits as well.
I mean, surely your function is about assessing and advising whether or not a proposal to regulate something can be sustained based on a cost-benefit analysis.
So the role of the office itself is to provide transparency around those. So again, we publish all those decisions, but it is actually still the role of and the responsibility of the relevant department to provide advice to government, and regulatory policy in general is a matter for the Department of Finance.
Okay, I'm just trying to work out what actually is going on there, because if I look at the data from your website, it looks like the regulatory costs have gone up a lot under the last few years. So what steps have you taken to try and restrain some of these costs on industry?
So in terms of regulatory policy, Senator, that would be a matter for the Department of Finance who have that.
But you collect all this information and you pass it on to them, do you?
So we provide it transparently, so it's available for stakeholders. Yeah.
Okay, so sorry, just so I understand this process, because it's very hard to, maybe I'm a bit slow, but so you were the Office of Best Practice Regulation, now you're the Office of Impact Analysis. You look at which stage in the Cabinet process do you look at policy proposals, or is it before it goes to Cabinet?
So we look at policy proposals coming forward.
Yeah, but when?
When? So, we look at in our processes, we'll look at policy authority or similar authority processes to, and sometimes we'll ask departments to reach out to us as well when they do have a policy proposal coming forward, and then the office makes an assessment against the guide if an impact analysis is required for that particular policy proposal.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure, Chair, whether I should table this documentation I have here for the benefit of the witness, but it's very simple data. But it effectively, according to your website, shows that you've gone from, in 2014-15, a net reduction in regulatory costs of 900 million in 14-15 to 1.4 billion net reduction in 15-16. And last year was a net increase in regulatory costs, according to your data, of 2.3 billion. So I'm just wondering how the Australian government has been able to construct a process, maybe it's because of changes of government or whatever, that now we have a situation where more and more costs are being piled onto business. And I'm trying to ascertain what value is this analysis adding at which stage of the process, because if you're collecting all this information and you've passed hundreds of bills last Parliament, this process doesn't appear to have reduced costs. So a good question is, which stage of the Cabinet process are you getting involved?
So I'm happy to help sort of navigate that, Senator. So the impact analysis work exists prior to a decision, and I think it's probably very
Before
important
Cabinet.
to note that it's not simply Cabinet decisions. There's a raft of decisions that are captured by the impact analysis. The purpose of the impact analysis approach is to ensure that these decisions that fall within the criteria that the officer has outlined, that the costs and benefits are explicit, that they've been worked through by the line department, and that they're in front of the decision maker prior to a decision being made. So that's really the purpose of it.
Which could be Cabinet?
It could be Cabinet, or it could be other decisions.
Could be a minister.
Because there's a raft of other decisions, obviously, that are captured by this as well. It really depends on the significance.
Okay. Well, given one last question, can I just ask you then, in relation to two of the proposals which have been costed on your website, so in relation to the country-by-country tax reporting and in relation to Future Made in Australia, you've put these at $50 million collectively in terms of compliance costs. What sort of back and forth occurred in relation to those?
So, Senator, again, these are, so the relevant department will estimate the compliance costs, so we'll provide, work with the department providing advice around, the measurement, how to apply the measurement framework. And then the department will submit for us, and then we'll assess the quality of the impact analysis, including the regulatory burden estimate, including against the Australian Government's Guide for Policy Impact Analysis. So we have a rubric that we've developed within the Office of Impact Analysis as a process to provide consistency around our assessments of the quality of analysis. That rubric goes across. We have the guide outlines 7 questions that each impact analysis needs to consider, and then our rubric breaks that down into sort of sub-questions, which departments that we're looking for departments to answer within their impact analysis to provide robust evidence for decision makers. So our role is to assist departments through training around the impact analysis framework, including the regulatory burden framework, and then to workshop with them as needed about applying that framework within the context of the specific policy. So obviously the analysis and the types of effects and impacts that will be considered will be specific to the policy. So we work with departments through that, and then finally, once they've completed the impact analysis, we assess the quality of that, and that is, we work with the departments around once to support a decision. Once the final decision is now announced, we work with departments around the transparency around that evidence base, and maintain the reporting, including on the regulatory burden estimates, and the entire impact analysis on our website. So that would be the process.
So, and if I may add to that, Senator, I'm happy to correct this if I'm wrong, but my recollection is what Ms Abaratna has outlined is essentially the way in which the, I suppose, Division of Labour was operated when I was Finance Minister, and it was OBPR. So it's not a new way of hopefully it's improved over the last 12 years. We've all got better at it, but fundamentally portfolios are responsible, or departments and agencies are responsible for their analysis, and the role of the office is to make sure they enable that to be as robust as possible for decision makers, which may be at a set of different levels. I suppose it's more like a quality assurance role, so there is confidence in the analysis and the robustness of the numbers and the assessment. But you wouldn't, no government has centrally, as far as I'm aware, the actual analysis would have to be done by, at least at first instance, by those with expertise in the policy area.
Yes.
If I'm wrong, you should correct me.
No, I mean, that is the way I think it has operated.
Chair, do you mind if I table these documents?
Can you tell me what?
They're just an analysis from the Office of Impact Analysis on how much compliance costs have changed over the last 10 years.
Well, who did the numbers is what I'm asking.
Did
you just get it off their website, or did you do them yourself?
Put them into a spreadsheet, yeah.
Oh, right, you got them off and put them in the spreadsheet. I just want to know the genesis of the document.
That's it.
We're not going with respect.
It could be wrong.
So that's your document. You prepared
Andrew
the document.
Bragg's document.
It's the Andrew Bragg document.
Okay.
And we
that.
haven't seen it yet. So if you're going to ask questions about it, it would be good if we could see it.
It's
Okay.
yours, Anna. Look, I'll be quick. Look, I'm sorry to have to talk to you again. I just wanted to ask you...
No, we really were hoping you would.
What's that?
I was really hoping you would.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, good. So I just have a couple of questions for the official, then a couple of questions for you, Minister. So, look, how many people are in this Office of Impact Assessment now? How many people work there?
Senator, the current head count is 15 people.
Okay, and you're leading it, are you?
Yes, that's correct. I'm the Executive Director.
Okay, and do you deal with FOI requests?
When it's related to our work.
Okay, did you get my FOI?
See, it's the Andrew Bragg FOI now. It was the Andrew Bragg document.
That's not a trick question. I just wanted to know whether you got my FOI.
Senator, what is that FOI relating to?
Oh, it was. I was just seeking, in accordance with my legal rights while they still exist, that I could please access any documents, including spreadsheets or drafts, correspondence, including emails, messages on personal devices or communications relating to the employment or reduction of staff relating to the Office of Impact Analysis between 2022 and the present.
So this is a staffing profile.
Yeah, I wanted to know
the office.
about why the headcount had changed.
So, Senator, we're very happy to talk about the staffing profile of the office, if that would assist in answering your question.
Well, my question was, did you receive my FOI?
Yeah, I understand we did, yes.
Yeah.
You did?
Yes.
Okay, so you did get the... Okay. So why didn't you... why were you unable to comply with that fairly simple request on headcount?
Have you made an agreement with the decision actually? So it's still under consideration. So my understanding, Senator, is the FOI is still under consideration by the decision maker. But as I said, we would be very happy to talk to you about the staffing profile now, if that would assist.
So has it gone from 22 to 16 people in the last few years? Is that right?
So, Senator, there's a bit of a nuance in that with respect to the way in which the office was staffed in order to provide surge support over a couple of years, and I think we can talk to you about kind of what that surge support
I'm just interested in the
required.
headline numbers. Is that right, broadly, 22 to 16?
They vary. So in 21-22, the actual ASL at that time was 17.6. It did increase in 22-23 to an actual ASL of 20.3, and then decreasing 23-24 to 16 ASL.
Okay, so 16 people who are analysing new policy proposals, including the cost of new regulation.
Senators, so there was 16 people at that period who were administering the Australian Government Guide. So again, we work with.
But I think we discussed before, the core function is to assess new policy proposals, including costs.
Is to assist in administering the impact in departments in preparing impact analysis.
It's not that complicated. Isn't your role about assessing new policy proposals, including the cost?
So, Senator, the Office of Impact Analysis assesses if an impact analysis is required for a particular proposal, and then we work with departments preparing impact analysis and considering the costs and benefits, including, as we discussed before, the regulatory costs and benefits.
Okay, so how many times have you provided an analysis to a department or an agency to reduce the cost of a particular proposal in the last Parliament?
So I think just to go back to our previous evidence on this matter, Senator, the role of the Office of Impact Assessment Analysis is really one of quality assurance. So its role is to ensure that there's rigour in the assessments and the analysis that are undertaken by line departments.
Fine. And how many times have you found that there hasn't been rigour?
So in terms of our assessment, Senator, we have, again, we assess them against the requirements in the Australian Government's Guide for Policy Impact Analysis, and we have varying levels of quality assessment from...
But how many times? How many times?
So from exemplary to good practice, the adequate and insufficient. So would you be referring to when we've assessed analysis as insufficient?
I asked you before how many bills had passed last Parliament. I think the answer is about 400, right? So let's say of those 400 bills, how many times did you issue advice which was adverse in relation to their approach to a particular policy proposal?
So in terms of the OIA assessing a particular impact analysis process as being insufficient...
how many times?
That would be... Yeah, I'll just pull up the figures. So in 25-26, this current financial year, we have one insufficiency.
One.
And the previous insufficiency was in 22-23.
Okay. So in the last Parliament, the government passed through 400 bills, according to your numbers, costing the economy almost $5 billion in new compliance costs. And you found one instance or two instances where you think things could have been done differently or better.
No,
two.
Hang on.
Twice.
Hang on. I think you're conflating two propositions here. You can have an argument about the policy objectives. I mean, I suspect some of those might be in industrial relations bills that you disagree
Could be
with.
tax, could be business regulation.
But the job of this office is not to second-guess policy parameters or policy decisions that are made. The job of this office is to make sure that the regulatory impact is transparent and robust. But it's not to second-guess the policy decisions that are made by the decision-maker. I think that's a reasonable...
Okay,
so
well,
it's not this official's, Ms Abaratna's job to justify or defend any particular proposition. Her job and her staff's job is to make sure that the impact analysis, what we used to call, is this what we used to call the RIS? Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me ask you then.
Is robust for decision makers.
Okay, well, let me ask you then. So,
Sure.
in the last Parliament, almost $5 billion of new compliance costs was imposed on business based on the data from this agency, right? $4.8 billion. So, you would agree, I imagine, that we now have more regulation than we had in the previous Parliament before that.
Well, I don't know if those figures are correct because they're the Andrew Bragg figures, but...
Well, it's from your information.
They're not... but I'm sure the officials...
Prime Minister and Cabinet data.
No, it's the Andrew Bragg document.
Well, I just pulled it off the website.
Yeah, well, I'm not verified that,
You should own it.
Senator Bragg, but can I make a broader observation?
Yeah.
That this is probably something better directed to Treasury.
Well, hang on.
No, because this, you're making a policy point. That's exactly the distinction that I was trying to make before. This office used to be in finance, actually, and it is very much, to my way of thinking, trying to assist decision makers and to get reasonable metrics around what the impact, the economic impact, of particular decisions are. But it is not to second guess decision makers. So if you want to have an argument, I understand the policy argument you want to have.
I don't want to have an argument.
Well, you do. That's okay. That's your job. There's probably a Treasury discussion or finance discussion. Sorry.
I just want to ask you a dumb question then, right? So if I'm a business, if I'm a business, right, in the economy somewhere, and the government of Australia wants to put in place a new law to regulate something, my understanding was it was the Office of Impact Analysis, which is in the Prime Minister's Department, which assesses how much that new compliance cost is going to be. Is that right or wrong?
Senator, it would be the responsibility of the department to make the assessment. The role of the office would be to trigger an IA. So it would be looking at those policies coming forward and against the guide, making an assessment if an IA was required. An impact analysis was required. Okay. Sorry, and then also
And you do quality control on that.
Yes, and then our secondary role, obviously, or additional role is to assess the quality. You do
quality control, and twice in the last Parliament, out of those 400 bills, you've said there are problems twice. So the government's re-regulated the economy, spent, forcing businesses to spend billions of dollars on new compliance costs, and you found 2 times where it could have been done differently or better.
Do we have the document, the Andrew Bragg document that I was promised? Is that what this is?
It's
the Andrew Bragg document. Oh, that's it.
Well, it's your data, Prime Minister's Department's data.
Sorry, just give us a minute. That's not...
There's one question and I'm done.
It's okay.
I'm getting moved on.
Well, well...
Just trying to be respectful.
And I thank you for that.
Well, Senator...
So I guess my question is, can I ask a question?
Well, hang on.
Are you answering or am I asking?
I was just asking, what, some of those costs are made up of, and that this is what I mean about this not being the only kind of parameters that you have to apply to policy metrics. Anti-money laundering is a cost on business. you know, and you know that. But there's also a public policy objective there, which I think is sound for the broader community, which is actually we don't want to facilitate criminals. So these are the decisions that decision makers have to make, of which the regulatory burden is one aspect of it. I'm sure it's not your position that we should somehow get rid of all of the money laundering.
No. Okay, well, look, my final question is just to summarise all that, right? So I think most people would accept that Australia is a heavily regulated economy. Many businesses would say there are too many regulations, which is why your Treasurer has announced that he now believes in deregulation. Okay, so the stocks of regulations on the books apparently are now subject to some sort of process by the Finance Department. We'll ask them tomorrow. But in terms of the flows of new regulations, my understanding is that your answer to my question, when I say I'm a business in the economy and I'm wanting to know which part of the sprawling Commonwealth government is going to assess the impact of new regulation on my business, you're saying that this office in the Prime Minister's Department has, in the last Parliament, looked at just 2 instances of the 400 bills and said, these don't pass muster.
Yeah, hang
2.
on. That is they are not the same question.
What do you mean?
It's not the same question.
This is how you assess flows.
Senator Bragg, first, the cost of a policy proposal, the regulatory impact of that, needs to be assessed by the relevant portfolio or department.
Yeah, and they do
agency.
QA.
Wait, it's not curated.
No,
this
it's
is
QA.
a quality assurance process.
Yeah.
What the evidence that was given was that there were 2 occasions in the last couple of years where that was found to not be compliant. Is that the whatever phrase you now use? Insufficient. You see, they've gone nicer than the words, and I think we used to say not compliant. So it doesn't mean that they weren't assessed, that costs weren't assessed, that only 2. All of the propositions had costs assessed. 2 were found to be insufficient.
You waved through $5 billion in new costs.
No, hang on. I don't think that's fair to say they waved them through. The evidence has been given. Well, hang on. Decisions have been made. You just don't want any regulation. That's fine.
It's too much. Your Treasurer said there's too much.
You can take that view. I've just given you an example where these are the judgments governments and ministers and agencies have to make, which is money laundering. Now, what do we do there? It is true. There are compliance costs. The
2
financial
400
services.
not many. Thank you.